Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the XL Tribesman podcast. My name is Kirkland. I'm your host. I guess that's going to be my new tagline because last episode I found myself saying that and I had never said that before. But definitely one of the things that I wanted to talk about was I got an idea yesterday. I was listening to my favorite podcast, which is now a Spotify exclusive podcast, but nonetheless, it's a podcast I've been listening to for many years now. It's called the Startup Podcast. And so there's an episode with one of the um, co creators of a show called Pose. Um, it's actually one of my favorite shows on TV, but I think one of the reasons that I loved the show so much was its authenticity of the New York ballroom scene. But not only that, it was its boldness to do something that had never been done before, which was having a cast that played transgender roles but were actually transgender as well. I think that was one of the first things. The second thing was I think it really was my first time having. It was like I was 10 or 12 or 13 or however old you are when you first get the conversation about the birds and the bees. But it was from a perspective that I could understand because it was talking about your first time with a man. And so for me, that was very impactful. And I think about how seeing that as a child would have helped shaped my understanding of the world a lot better. I think a lot of the things I did in my youth I wouldn't have done. And so I definitely feel like that for that reason, like hats off to them because he said when they were in the writer's room, one thing they had to keep debating on was like whether they were going to take it, what was riding on the success of the show. And that's exactly what I've been thinking about lately. When it comes to this blog, XL Tribe is one of a kind in terms of the content that we produce. It is definitely one of a kind. Um, there is one other site out there. They're called Trapster. It's ran by a really great guy, Bruce, and they laid a lot of the framework for me to see. And then I just came in and added, my sauce on top of the framework that they laid down. But one of the things I find so important is that I'm finding ever more imperative that this brand succeeds because this is going to be the blueprint for some little guy or little kid, looking for a way to see himself in media. And I think more and more I'm thinking about that little boy that I was and how seeing something like this would have changed everything for me. And I started to think about how XL Tribe really needs to succeed. Um, and I think it really invigorated the spirit that I have around the brand and how I need to keep going and keep pushing it harder. And even when it feels like success is taking a long time, just being patient and resting and not, you know, moving faster than things need to move, although I want them to move faster. Um, you know, I think this is a perfect example. I'm going, it's the brand is almost at its 4 year mark, and one of the things that I keep thinking about is how I spent 6 months, 6 months, the whole spring and summer of 2016, debating about whether I wanted to do this or not. And because, you know, up until this point, like this was my XO Tribe is my fourth or fifth business. And I've never been successful in business before. So for me, it was definitely a leap of faith because I'm like, oh my God, here I go starting another brand. And you start telling yourself all kind of things. Oh, it's not gonna be successful. It's not gonna be like the other ones. I mean, it's gonna be like the other ones. Why even waste your time? But you have this burning desire in the back of your mind to do something more, and you just know that whatever's coming is going to be way more than you've ever dreamed of. And I can definitely say I still like in my office I have a wall, or I'm sorry, I forgot I called it a name. In my cloffice I have a wall of appreciation. I've been thinking about what I want to do with the wall. I've been thinking about, should I complete the wall, or leave it the way it is. And I'm not sure about that part yet, but what I am sure about is that I have a wall of appreciation up, and I consistently look at this wall and I'm always reminded of where I started. I have a picture hanging up of my very first paid photo shoot. I have a picture hanging up of my very first fashion show that I attended. I have a picture hanging up of two of the most influential people in my business life. I have a picture of the first model I ever photographed. There's so many firsts on here. It's it's stunning to me how far I've come. A lot of these people have become my close personal friends, and it's those moments that I think of when I thought about quitting, because you start having doubts. Every time something fails, you start having doubts a little bit sooner than you did before. Because, of course, naturally, you're trying to prevent yourself from going through what you just went through. So, naturally, as soon as something fails, before in the past, you might have given it two or three tries. But once you've been burnt once or failed once, you automatically start thinking about everything bad that can happen instead of focusing on everything good. And I am simply here to say that I want you guys to take a moment, whatever you're doing, unless you're driving, but really reflect on where your life is and reflect on all the little details. Like, yeah, for example, I don't own a Tesla. I don't have 10 properties. So, if you want to look at it from that perspective, yes, I haven't quote unquote made it. I'm not completely debt free. I'm a lot further than where I was, years ago, but I'm not completely debt free. So, if you were to look at it based on those terms, then you could say I didn't make it. But if you ask me, the fact that I was able to set up my bills on auto pay this month, it's like that's an accomplishment for me, because 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago I was definitely robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then stealing a little off the top from Paul to put back to Peter, so Peter didn't completely realize that I had took all his money. Like, life was hard. Um, Plenty of times I wanted to end this all. Like, not even just the brand, but my life, you know? And it was hard. I kept thinking, like, what was all of this for? And this time around, I really feel like I can look at life and say, like, I'm starting to see why I struggled so hard in life. For the first time, I can look up and see my successes and see the things I've been able to accomplish from nothing. You guys, I took a $12 investment. That's how much money I had. I had like $12 and like 80 cents in my bank account the day that I bought xltribe.com. And that day, I have never, from that day, like, I really felt like I've been on the trajectory that I'm supposed to be on. Even when the days get hard, because I'm not gonna lie, there are some days and some weeks where you're just like, what am I doing? It feels like I'm talking to myself. I think this podcast is a prime example. Like, I've wanted to be more consistent with the podcast, but every time I put out an episode, it was like I would get three people listening, and I know that sounds ungrateful because it at that moment it was, but I think what I was focusing on was the fact that three people listened to it instead of focusing on three people listening to it. If you know what I mean, you know what I mean. And that in itself was the issue. It was like I wasn't focusing on the small wins or seeing them as wins whatsoever. I was like, oh, only three people listened. Oh, I'm talking to myself again. And then you put out the next episode and you're like, oh, five people listened. Great. Still talking to myself. Um, but I say all that to say, when you are a trailblazer in what you're doing, I know this is a lot of added pressure, but I implore you to take the pressure and use it as fuel to make diamonds instead of fuel to run yourself into the ground. Think about think about 5-year-old you, 10-year-old you, what he or she would have wanted to help them make different choices in life. Think about that. And really, 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 really like hone in on your craft. Um, because I feel like the more you work on that, the more you will realize that whatever it is seemed hard, but it's really not that hard once you start applying your full self. Because I can say in my other businesses I applied myself, but I never really applied myself. It was like I was just doing whatever the bare minimum was to say I had a business. But to say that I eat, sleep, and breathe it, like I was thinking about how to grow it every day, I didn't. When I had my other business, there were weeks, sometimes months, where I wouldn't even do anything with my brand. I wouldn't push it on social. I wouldn't blog, or I wouldn't, post new products or try to get different, party promotion things going, whatever it was I was doing at the time. Like, I was never pushing myself. Um, and I think a lot of that contributed to why none of those businesses worked. And I think all of those things that I learned from all those failed businesses, I put that into this business to help it get to where it is today. And this is only the beginning. So make sure that when you're creating, you consider that what you're is going to be the blueprint for the next person to follow, to make it that much easier to walk in a door that the world already tells you you shouldn't be walking through because you're too fat, you're not good enough, you black, you're a person of color, you're a woman, you're whatever stereotype the world tells you you are, and because of that you can't succeed. Remember that what you're building is the prototype for them to come and perfect. Until next time, please, please focus on the small wins. And when you look back, you'll realize they turned into big ones.